welcome to Drum Talk, and today the subject is Steve Gadd. Now Steve Gadd's another one of those influences. I had my LA session drummer influences, and Steve Gadd represents the New York session drummer influences. Now, there were some great New York session drummers in the 60s, just like there were in LA. You had guys like Gary Chester, I think another guy named Buddy Saltzman. There's a couple others. I know I'm missing some. The New York session drummers, like there are guys like Mel Lewis, who's a famous jazz drummer, was a session drummer in New York. Ed Shaughnessy, when he lived in New York, when the Tonight Show was in New York, did sessions. But the session scene changed in New York when Bernard Purdie and Rick Marotta, okay, and Alan Schwartzberg and Chris Parker and Grady Tate, and then a guy came up out of the Army band named Steve Gadd. And Rick Marotta and Tony Levin, among others, I'm sure Richard T. too, brought Steve Gadd into the fold. And it's infamous that Steve Gadd ended up being in a band called Stuff with Chris Parker, another New York session drummer. So New York had a whole session scene in the 70s. And Steve Gadd became the most famous because of some of the great recordings he actually played on. Now, his first #1 hit was The Hustle by Van McCoy. And a lot of guys don't know that Steve Gadd played on that one. But he played on many, many hits for many, many artists, okay? Paul Simon was one of his regular clients. Carly Simon was another one of his regular clients. Of course, the connection with Chick Corea is infamous. Chuck Mangione. I mean, these are all people that Steve Gadd played with. Now, 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover is the most recognizable drum beat probably anywhere. And Steve Gadd came up with that beat on a session where he went in playing it more like a bossa nova, and the engineer and Paul Simon heard him goofing around, as the legend goes, told by Steve, by the way. The legend goes, they heard him goofing around with some of his practice stuff he would do in between takes, and that whole thing came out of it. Now, as you can see, I don't play it exactly like Steve Gadd did, because Steve put this, he came down with a hi-hat foot to get the first hi-hat note. And when I learned it off the record back in the 70s, I was of course playing it overhand at first, and then I learned the proper sticking by looking at Modern Drummer. I was looking for the issue today. I've got 40 years of Modern Drummer in this studio, and maybe more than 40 years, because it's older than 40 years now. But I've got the full collection of Modern Drummer from the beginning, and I didn't have time to go through every one to find the actual transcription of 50 Ways, which was somewhere in the early 80s, I believe. If anybody knows that exact issue, let me know. I'll go looking for it. But when I first got that transcription of it, and I was looking at it, it showed it as a left. And it might have even showed it as a foot, but because I couldn't get that foot trick, I ended up doing it as a stick, with the left stick. So my cheater for doing 50 Ways, and I've been doing this now for, gosh, since the late 70s, okay, has been always to do it on the hi-hat this way. Now, I did a video of me playing 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, but apparently that's a no-go now on YouTube if you use the original version. And I didn't get a drumless track, so I had to kind of lock up on it, and I think I did a pretty good job, but you guys will never hear it. What you will hear is one day I'll put out the whole track I did drumless, and I will use parts of that track today on the front and back end of this this video about Steve. Now, Steve was an amazing influence in more ways than one. Steve was an amazing influence as a studio drummer for his uniqueness of being able to play jazz, rock, pop, whatever. He could play whatever. He had a big band background, a marching background, a jazz organ background. He played very straight traditional kind of swingy Buddy Rich style at first, but collided with Tony Williams and those guys and Elvin and Jack DeJohnette somewhere during his infamous meeting with Chick Corea. Basically showed him how Chick Corea plays drums, and Chick showed him something, and apparently the Tony Williams influence that he was looking for came out, and Chick hipped him up to Tony Williams. He started listening to Tony Williams. Well, he took the Tony Williams thing and put his thing on it, and Steve's a legend. He's a legend, no doubt about it. He could play circles around guys. He was amazing. He had the technique plus the feel. So he was a huge influence to drummers from my era. Huge influence. Now, my first understanding of Steve Gadd came through the Steely Dan song Asia. And of course, when we heard the Wayne Shorter solo section with Steve playing all the licks over top of it, and then the ending of the song, that became kind of a staple for drummers to kind of want to get to know and learn. By the way, there is a transcription of that. It's in the 1978 issue of Modern Drummer magazine, the one where it had Jeff Porcaro and his father and Ed Shaughnessy on the cover. That was the issue before the Steve Gadd issue came out the next quarter, and that's the one where there's a transcription of the Asia solo. There's also a book called the Steve Gadd book, and I will reference it. It's a PDF file. I have a copy of this PDF file. It has all the transcriptions. Now, I'm not a guy that loves reading transcriptions, but I couldn't pass up getting a hold of that PDF file. So if any of you guys want it, leave something in the comments or message me through Google Plus and my Google account, and I will send you a copy of it. It's out of print. I don't think anybody could ever find this book if they wanted to, and it is on the web somewhere. That's where I found it. If you're into the whole transcription thing. Because Steve played on a lot of records. He played on Lee Ritenour tunes, the Brecker Brothers. Gosh, the list is incredible. Al Jarreau. There's a transcription of Al Jarreau's Spain, some of the patterns he did for that. Now, another thing Steve did was he had a setup that he loved to play. And he brought this into the studio thing back in the 70s, which was a setup with a 10-inch concert tom, 12-inch concert tom, a 13 and a 14. And they were concert toms that he put bottom heads on. And I've alluded to this in my concert tom video, that Steve Gadd had a set of Pearl concert toms. He did. And he had a drum shop or himself, I don't know which, but they were white concert toms and he put double heads on them. And reportedly, once he got that set up, him and Rick Morana both did this to their drums. They put double heads on concert toms. Apparently, his first introduction to Yamaha back in the mid-70s, he told them about it, and he had his infamous black, piano black Yamaha kit with a 6.5 by 10 double-headed tom. It actually had the snare lugs on it. If any of you guys have seen this picture, there's a famous Zildjian ad with this picture in it. Had the snare lugs on it from the deep snare drum, and then he had the 8 by 12, and then he had the 9 by 13, 10 by 14, and eventually they became bigger sizes. And he did play power toms for a short season, but he never really liked the power toms. On the high toms, he always liked the more traditional depths. But Steve was a monster player, a huge influence on my life, a huge influence in the drum set as we know it today. The fusion kits all came from that Gadd style. My first drum kit, my first Gretsch kit, which this is, did not have a 10-inch tom. I bought the 10-inch tom, that's why it's got the 80s Gretsch badge on it, the Gretsch badge, not the 79 badge, because my drums are 79 Gretsch with that Gretsch drums, it says, and it says drum makers since 1883. So these are the 79 era badge for the Gretsch drums, but my 10 came after the fact. Now, the day I bought the kit, I will tell you, a guy named Tim Herman, who used to work at the Modern Drum Shop and the Professional and Percussion Center in New York, Frank Ippolito's store, he tried to sell me the 10 and the 12 and the 13 and the 14. Gadd's been a huge influence on my career, on my life. You can see him in my playing style. He comes out. especially when I do the rolly kind of stuff. Now, I never had that crisp drum corps technique, as you can tell. Matter of fact, I think I don't have much technique at all. But Steve had this crisp technique, but he also had that something else that he put in it. So I tried to, when I did the 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover groove that you're going to see drumless, I actually did the whole song not drumless, but you're going to see it drumless. I actually, during the breakdown, the bridge, the chorus section, I guess, Hop on the Bus, Gus, all that stuff, I was actually doing a little bit more of the stuff I think I heard him doing, the little back, but it was my interpretation, of course, of how Gadd might have played that section, because I don't think he played that section this way. I didn't hear that kind of straight thing. I heard a lot more. I heard more of that marchy Steve Gadd stuff. And whenever I have to play a marchy part, like even when I do worship music, a lot of times there are these marches. If I have that in the music and I'm writing out my own chart, I write Gadd. Or just that's my little marking. I'll write Gadd March or just Gadd. And I know that means to go into that kind of marchy stuff because he was known for them. That was the Steve Gadd thing. So, in closing, Gadd's a huge influence. He had an influence on the drum kits we use. He's had an influence on my cymbal choices. He always had kind of darker, drier cymbals. That was another thing I've talked about in the past a little bit. Matter of fact, in the Gadd 50 Ways cover that you're not going to see as a cover, you're just going to see the drum part. And I didn't play it very much. I threw in the K, the 20-inch K that's cracked. I got the big crack on the top, just to give it that kind of Steve Gadd thing. I love watching him play the heck out of that ride cymbal with the crack in it. It's so cool watching him play it. I don't know about you guys, but when I watch drum videos, I want to see how cool the drummer looks. And Steve Gadd always looked extremely cool playing the drums. Matter of fact, most of the guys I really dig always had that kind of look to when they played. It was never a mechanical thing. They just had a certain look, this kind of, they were vibing, and you could always feel that Steve was vibing on stuff. He still does that today when he's playing with James Taylor, or if he's playing with Eric Clapton, or if he's played with Paul Simon. He's always had that vibe. That's the mystery to me, is the vibe of a drummer. What makes them make those faces? What makes them dig in the way they do? What makes them pull back the way they do? What makes them hear the time a little bit different? Steve had those kind of ears, and he had a certain way of hearing the music. And one of the things he said that was profound to me was when he went into a session, he wouldn't start playing along and jamming. He'd wait for them to play the song down, and he might stand there with the chart, and he wanted to hear it, and he always wanted to have the lyrics, because for him, he didn't want to step on the lyrics. He wanted to make sure that his parts fit the music. And he was so much into that, playing the music. I think that's a theme in my influences, is playing the music. And hopefully you will hear that in everything I say, because I always talk about coming back to playing the music. If the music's rocking, you gotta rock. Okay? I mean, that's why a Lars Ulrich makes Metallica. Not because Lars is such a great player, because I don't think he is a great player, but he makes Metallica's the way he plays it. He has a certain way of playing it. So not necessarily playing with all the technique is what it's about, it's your vibe. And Gadd had a vibe. He still has a vibe. And today he plays like himself. If you watch some of the videos with him playing with Chick Corea last year, he plays like himself. He's got his own thing. So I am just tip my hat to Steve Gadd and thank him for his influence on my playing. I thank him for 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover. Unfortunately, don't try to do that as a cover, because you get a lot of trouble for that stuff with the YouTube police, which I don't think is YouTube police. It's the owners of the music. I understand. Even if we put, we're not going to monetize or do nothing. We're just doing it as a drum cover. It still gets you into trouble. So I learned my lesson. I even tried pitching it, trying to change the pitch of the song. They caught that too. So anyhow, the algorithms are saying you don't do it. So we got to bow to the YouTube gods. Anyhow, thank you for watching this drum talk. I hope I didn't ramble on too much. If I did, hopefully I cut it. I enjoy these times. Thank you to my subscribers. If you like my drum talk stuff, please subscribe. And if you don't, well, you know the thing there. If you don't like it, you're going to leave a nasty comment or you're just not going to say nothing. I get it. But thank you for being a subscriber. Thank you for tuning into my channel. I do appreciate it. And thank you for listening to my videos. Hopefully it inspires some of you to be better players. I know some of you guys inspire me for sure. So anyhow, have a great day.